Welcome back to another Reddit deep dive episode. And before we dive in, I want to thank our channel members for partially sponsoring this and every other video that I upload. We've been on so many of these deep dives, and because of that, the amount of interesting posts on Reddit is becoming harder and harder to find. While I don't intend on ending our deep dive series, I would love to introduce new forms of deep dive content. So with that being said, let me know what kind of things you want me to dive into in the future, and leave any suggestions you may have down in the comments. Now that that's out the way, let's dive in. The first story we're going to look at happened very recently and was uploaded on November 30th of 2023. A concerned Redditor by the name Unhappy Machine Spirit would come onto the RBI subreddit with this post. Found an abandoned car in the woods and looked like something bad maybe happened. I found an abandoned 1999 Honda Civic in a forest on the Nevada-California border. Normally I wouldn't think much of an abandoned car, but it just kinda looked like something bad happened. The trunk was popped and items still inside. These items were a box of diapers, a sunshade for a pram, an infant-sized winter jacket, a plush toy for an infant, and an open envelope for a paycheck from a business in Reno. The envelope has a name, address, and employee ID number on it. There was a baby carrier in the back seat, which luckily only had some trash in it, and not a baby. The other things in the car were just some food and drinks trash, and a sock that was baby-sized. All the baby stuff was pink and girly, so I assumed that the baby was a little girl as well. The name on the envelope was a female as well. The car had the license plate removed, the lights and the radio removed, as well as the back tires removed. Outside the car was an empty box of diapers, a high heel hanging from a tree with a sole torn up, and the matching shoe across the clearing on the ground. Also, a mound of fresh dirt between the shoe tree and the car. I took photos of everything and wrote down the VIN and the name and address on the envelope. I wandered around the surrounding area of the forest a bit more, and I found a pile of women's clothes strewn about on the ground maybe 100 feet away into the tree line. These clothes weren't winter appropriate. Looked like it was underwear, a bra, and some shorts. Seeing the clothes started to give me some worry for what may be the situation with this car if it's connected. I ran the VIN number through an online search, and the number doesn't come back as reported stolen. The other things that unnerved me were that everything was dry and mostly cleaned compared to the surroundings. We've had consistent rainfall, and the ground was muddy, yet the diaper box on the ground was dry. The cardboard didn't seem to have been rained on or anything, or even absorbed much water from the mud. The contents of the trunk were also dry and fairly clean, which seemed wrong given the fresh mud and consistent rain. The exposed metal from where the tires were removed also hasn't rusted yet. The car was also neatly parked in a clearing and not on the road, like it got stuck in mud or snow. I called this into the police, gave them photos, GPS location, and the Forest Service road number, but I've heard nothing back. The county this forest sits in is pretty small, so I don't know if the police have the resources to even check the car out. Given that the car seemed to be freshly left there, and the child is involved, I want to get some closure that whoever this belonged to is okay, and this is just a stolen car left in the woods. Does anyone have any advice on what I can do to get more information on what happened? I will admit, this forest has always given me unnerving vibes, so maybe I'm reading too deep into this, but I do want to make sure nothing worse happened to whoever owned that car and the baby. Definitely an eerie discovery. It has all of the makings of a true crime story. Other Redditors would express their concerns in the comments as well. You might consider contacting the employer and letting them know you found some of this woman's belongings, including a pay stub, but don't know how to reach her. Then pass on your info in case she wants to get in touch. If you do this, I wouldn't give it too much detail about how you found it, in order to protect her privacy. Depending on the size of the company and the person you speak to, they may just disregard your call entirely. But if she stops showing up to work, your call could raise a red flag and prompt them to report the issue to the police as well. You could also send the letter to the address you found. I know some people think it's dramatic to continue following up, but I agree that you probably won't get closure. I would rather exhaust my resources than just let police handle it, knowing that they may not look into it at all. Even if it is just a stolen car, I'm sure this person would like to know where it is, and there's no guarantee the cops will contact them, especially if they didn't report it missing for whatever reason. This is a great reply, and I love that you thought of protecting her from accidentally saying something to her boss that could get her in trouble, or expose something she needed to hide from them. Because describing the actual situation in whole is definitely not the call I ever want my boss getting. I don't know what could end up with my stuff in such circumstances, but whatever it is, the last thing I need is my boss knowing and having to explain to them. This is all really good, thank you. The company she worked at is pretty big, one of the big players in Reno, so hopefully they do care. I feel the same about just letting them handle it. The county this car is in is small as hell, so the local PD may not even go out and look. Plus, even Reno PD might not see it as priority. Ultimately, I just want the owner of this car and her baby to be safe, or in the worst case scenario, help further finding out what happened. I will admit, I don't know a lot about how someone living out of their car may leave the car, but it didn't appear like she was living out of it. It just had baby stuff, and some food, and drink trash, like wrappers and cans. Unless someone stole what she had in there and left the baby stuff, it looks not very suitable for living, but I could be wrong. It's also rather far from civilization, and would be a mile-long hike just to get out of the woods and probably like 15 more-ish miles to the business that envelope had. By no means is that not doable for someone, but it would be very difficult, especially as it is higher in elevation and gets below freezing and snows up here regularly in the winter. Luckily, it didn't take long for the OP and the RBI to get the answers, because the next day, the OP came back to the sub with an update. I have good news, y'all. This was luckily the best case scenario, and my update is mundane. With the help of others with far better detective skills than me, we were able to track down the individual's Facebook page. This has been confirmed to be the individual who owned the car. She is safe, and her child is safe as well. She's active on Facebook, and I contacted her with the information on where the car is. She had posted about it getting stolen in early September, and no one else had stumbled upon it and told her until I did. Thank you to everyone who helped guide me to find her and help her find her car. I'm very happy this was just a creepy find and nothing more than theft. And that's that. Case closed. It still fascinates me how easily Redditors can find people, especially when they work together. This is part of the reason the RBI sub is so popular, and also part of the reason the internet can be very terrifying as well. This post comes from the user Today on Reddit Planet and was posted onto the RBI sub on June 28th of 2023. It goes like this. How likely is it that there is something to this blocked off section of wall in my parents' home? My dad's always told us that when he signed the closing of the house, the seller winked and said, "Hope you find it, and I hope you make a lot of money off of it," and then just left. Both my parents said, "Wait, what?" But he hurried away. No idea. That was in 1992, and that story comes up now and again. Last time we talked about this, we ended up ripping out part of the wall in the stairwell, just out of curiosity. This time, we're talking about cracking through a bricked over wall in the basement. According to the town records at our library, our house was standing before they started writing these things down in the 1860s. My dad specifically remembers going there, searching for it, and finding that information. Recently, when we looked again, the records were gone. The librarians and historians don't know what happened. It's an old house, too old to even have the classic Michigan basement. The basement is a stone box, with a crawl space in the back corner. If you follow this crawl space, climbing over and under some of the house's framework, you end up at a cistern. The top of the cistern is covered with an iron dome that's up against the bottom of the floor, so we have no idea what's down there. We've found several odd things in the crawl space, pieces of ancient petrified leather shoes, and rib bones. I had these in my toy box growing up, and I'm trying to hunt them down again. If I do, I'll post pictures. Across from the entrance to the crawl space is a brick hole similar in size. In the yard behind this section, the grass dies in a line going downhill towards the town. In one spot, some of the yard has eroded away to reveal a bit of cement. My unconfirmed theory is that this is connected to the Underground Railroad. Downhill from us in town is the house of my childhood friend. His basement has tunnels similar to mine that were confirmed to be a section of the railroad. Did I read too much Nancy Drew as a child? Or should I look into this? The OP stated that their house dates back to the 1800s, which could line up with the theory of it being associated with the Underground Railroad that, according to the National Geographic Society website, occurred between 1810 and 1850, so that adds some validity to the theory. I definitely think it's odd that the realtor would say that to the OP's father, assuming that it did happen. I know that many realtors do intentionally keep information from some homes such as deaths, crimes, and other not so appealing events in an effort to close the sale without scaring off their buyer. But I think if this home was part of such a big historical event, then why hide it? If anything, I would think that the home would be more valuable. It just doesn't make sense to me that this is what they were hinting when they said, "Hope you find it." And there's also the bones and the shoes, which together hidden inside a crawl space paint a dark picture, but could still completely be unrelated to each other. A commenter by the name Regular Owl would comment this: "One thing you might want to think about is researching the property records and then doing searches for the names of the former owners in the local newspaper. While I doubt you'll be able to find a headline like 'Eccentric Millionaire Announces Hidden Booty in Home,' you might get some hints. Arrested on suspicion of theft, former owner went on a trip to somewhere exotic, etc. Are any of your neighbors older or have been there for a long time? Have you asked any of them if they've ever heard any rumors about your house or former owners of it? Or maybe considered the possibility that y'all got trolled?" The OP would reply back with this: "Just got the house records. There's 2 names on there that aren't from my family. One of them is dead, but female, so not the man my dad bought the house from. I'll start looking into the other guy and see if there's a possibility I could speak to him. Edit, my dad said the man he bought the house from is long dead. Going to look elsewhere." Unfortunately, since both of the past owners are no longer with us, we're kinda left with only one option, and that is to go inside of the crawl space. And that's exactly what the OP did, because soon after their original post, the OP came back with this update. "Thought I'd add an update to my post last week. Sadly, there's not much to share. We inspected the brick wall more thoroughly, moving shelving units and such. Looking at where the support beams of the house rest, the wall was definitely put there to reinforce the frame of the house. I don't know the technical lingo, but I'm assuming they had to replace something and rebuild it, and use cement and bricks. There was at some point a crawl space behind this wall, under the front porch. After talking about it, we realized that the people who reinforced this wall would have had to have filled the space with sand or cement because there is cement under the porch. And what 1800s farmer would take the time to reinforce a cement slab to keep an unused crawl space open instead of just filling it in? Just speculation, but it seems more likely than a chamber of treasure or skeletons. I went into the crawl space. Fuck that thing. It took me a couple of days of mental preparation, as I'm severely claustrophobic, and I've been terrified of that hole in the wall since I was a kid. It's absolutely filthy. It's a dry, dusty dirt floor space that was filled in with vermiculite and cellulose insulation. I army crawled through dead mice, poop, and hot insulation for about a half hour, trying to keep from panicking, and couldn't even get close to the cistern unless I squeezed through a web of electrical wires and crawled through a 1-foot space. I'm a petite person, but wasn't up for it. I could see that I wouldn't be able to turn around if I made my way up to it, so I decided to call it a day. I did find a piece of dog pelvis, which explains the rib bones. I found more shoes. I'm no shoe expert, but they seem old. Anyone who knows shoe shit might find it interesting. The previous owners of the house are dead, and I couldn't dig up anything about legends of treasure in the area, so sorry Reddit, just an old house, and my excitable imagination." These are the pictures that the OP included in the update. I am glad to say that the bones weren't from a person, and although the OP wasn't able to make it all the way to the end, I did look up what a cistern from the era would have looked like, and it would have looked like this. While we don't have confirmation that this was at the end of the crawl space, it seems likely, and honestly, with how old everything is, it was probably better that the OP couldn't get all the way in there and potentially risk getting stuck inside. A Redditor by the name History Nuts did comment this, which could give us some sort of explanation about the origin of these leather shoes. "Those shoes date back from the 1800s. The one shoe with the many buttonholes comes from a lady's boot like the first one on this page. The other one is a man's shoe with 2 holes made from a gross-grained bow, like this shoe. It also seems like the shoes are leather and probably punched by hand. In all, it seems like you probably found concealed shoes, especially if the space was sealed up afterwards. This commenter linked a Wikipedia page that gave us a bit of information about an old concealed shoe custom. In the past, people would hide shoes and other charms around their homes in an effort to protect the building's occupants from demons, ghosts, and witches. Obviously, this was superstition, but it was a fairly common practice. Looking at these shoes, they appear to be the same style as the ones people would hide, so this theory could be plausible. As for the dog bones, maybe a poor dog accidentally made its way into the crawl space and got stuck. The OP was suspended at the time of making this video, so I was unable to find out any more information about this crawl space, though from what I've seen, I believe that the OP has gotten their answer and has likely moved on from this mystery. In the end, only the house knows the secrets hidden behind the walls. This post was uploaded on August 25th of 2023 by a Redditor with the name Ashen Necromancer. 10 armed cops showed up at my door. For a bit of context, my husband and I bought this house last month. The owners were in a pretty big rush to get out, but my realtor explained that the house had been on the market 3 times, and twice it fell through. The owners were moving out of the country, as the woman had just gotten a job in the UK, and her father was ill. She signed the papers a week before we signed. According to my realtor, her father took a very hard turn and was on his deathbed, so she needs to get out before he passes. This all happened last Sunday. I was getting ready for work when there was a knock at the door. My husband and I weren't expecting anyone, but I ran downstairs and answered the door. Standing there was one cop on my porch, standing out of view of our video doorbell. Around the corner of the porch were 4 more cops, hands on guns. Poking out from behind the gate to my backyard were another 5 cops, also hands on guns. Needless to say, I was scared shitless. The cop at the door started asking questions regarding the old owner of the house. The conversation went something like this. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Is the old owner here?" "Oh no, she's not here." "Do you know when she will be back?" "Oh no, she's not coming back. She doesn't live here anymore." "And what is your relationship to the old owner?" "None. I just bought the house from her, that's all." "How long have you been here?" "About a month or 2. Back in the beginning of July." "Do you know where they went?" "Not really, no. I believe she left for the UK, but I don't know for sure." "All right. Well, sorry for bothering you, ma'am. Have a nice day." I still had my video feed up from the doorbell, and I just heard the cops go, "She's fled the country." The cops stuck around for about half an hour before they all left. I have no idea why the cops were there looking for the old owner, and I have no idea if they will be back. I'm not sure what to do at this point, if I just leave it alone or what. I'm confused and concerned. A bit of a note, we have security cameras installed. I think the cops knew about this prior to coming. There was an undercover officer present, and the cops knew where to hide in the blind spots of the cameras. They came through our neighbor's yard behind a big pine tree. The cameras picked them up as they were moving in front of our cars, but then they hid in the blind spots. One Redditor would say this: "Can you check the clerk of courts for any violations against the previous owners? I have checked the public records online and didn't find anything of note. A couple of traffic violations from 8 years ago, fines for missing court dates that were paid off, and then a charge for not having her dog registered or vaccinated for rabies. But that charge was also paid off. But I think I'll give the clerk a call tomorrow to see if there's anything recent. Thanks for the advice." Honestly, I would say that the OP is lucky to be alive. Had this been a swatting-style police confrontation, there's no telling what could have happened. Part of me feels like the police could have done a bit more digging, seeing as how the OP had been in their new home for a whole month already. But another part of me feels like they were at least a little aware, given the conversation they had with the OP, and that they just needed to confirm while playing it safe. This all obviously hints that maybe the previous owner's rush wasn't because of an ill family member, and instead an effort to evade the police. Thankfully, we would get an update about a week later. "Hello RBI. I apologize for the late update. I wanted to take time to allow my emotions to cool and collect as much information I could on the situation. Nothing is definitive at this point, and there are speculations about the situation, but I believe I have come up with the answer that makes sense, at least to me. I met my neighbor last week, as her package was sent to my house instead of hers. We started talking, and it turns out she was the original buyer for my house, but backed out on the last minute, before the contract was finalized. She told me that basically everything my realtor had told us were lies. We were told that my neighbor went no contact for no reason, and just bailed on the contract. However, her reason for backing out was due to the modifications the owners had made to the house. There's a strange structure in our garage we assumed had been used to hang sporting equipment, or things of that sort. However, we now believe that it was used as a growing operation for pot, which is currently illegal in my state. When my neighbor was looking at the house, she had a video of her going into the garage, and there was a box fan strapped to the roof above the structure, as well as lights in that area. Up in the structure, trusses and the support beams for the roof had been modified and cut in order to accommodate the lights. There is also a hookup for water in the garage, which seemed rather strange. The owners tried to claim that this was left over from the original owner of the house, but I'm not so sure I can believe that. Why would they leave it up for 12 years if it wasn't being used? My neighbor was looking at the house back in March, and from what she said, the family was living in a hotel at the time, yet all of their furniture was still there. Beds were still up, and there was an air mattress laid out on the garage floor. Neither of us understood why they were living in a hotel, rather than in their home, with all of their furniture. If the law was after them, however, it would make sense. The garage being a growing operation also accounts for our janky electric. It has since been repaired, but during the job, the electrician had mentioned that a lot of the power was being diverted to the garage. My husband had to awkwardly explain our theories. In any case, much of the damages to the house because of the grow operation were never disclosed to us. Lawyers have been contacted, and we're seeking legal action against the realty company. We have been advised it might not be a good idea to go after the old owners, as they may no longer be in the country. There are no assets we could go after. I'd still love to give the old owners a piece of my mind, as they have been nothing but shady the whole time we were buying. I am still salty over something they did the day we bought the house. TLDR, they broke into the house and took stuff that legally belonged to us after we finalized the sale. Again, a lot of this stuff is speculation, but these are the answers that make the most sense at the time. Despite this just being the OP's theory, I do believe this could be the answer. At least hopefully it was just a grow lab, and not a chemical drug lab. Going back to the last story we covered, I think these serve as lessons to always research the history of the home you intend to buy, and don't just go off of what these realtors say. Tons of damage could have happened in this situation, and that's not the only potential risk. We have the police, as we've seen here, and even possible criminal activity for those who had known what was happening in the house before a new family moved in. And what if the owner didn't move out of the country? There's just so many possibilities, and unnecessary stress on the OP and their family, in the place that they should be able to feel the safest. May the Lord have mercy on his soul. I grew up in cemeteries and have been exploring them since I was about 6 or 7 years old. As a result, I'm always on the hunt for interesting gravestones. When I was about 13, I wandered up to the furthest point of St. Mary's Cemetery in Windsor Locks, Connecticut to discover the gravestone of a man named James Mulvey. I was struck by the fact that his grave was at the furthest corner of the cemetery, isolated from the other graves, with no family members to speak of. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that his grave bore the inscription, "May the Lord have mercy on his soul," and it left quite an impression on me when coupled with the aforementioned factors. Additionally, I have never encountered a grave where the individual was born in a different country and died in a different state from where they were buried. The impression proved to be lasting because I went home and did as much research as possible, though it yielded little results. Eventually, I let the matter go, but every now and then the memory of this mysterious figure would revisit my imagination, to the point where I visited his grave during my honeymoon trip when I was 23, and I'm sitting here today at the age of 27, in a final-ditch effort to solve this mystery. The enigma compounded a few days ago when I decided to independently revisit my search to find an article from The Pilot, a Boston-based newspaper. This clipping only intensified the urge to finally satiate my curiosity, since it solidified that this man appeared to be as mysterious in life as in death. Why was he not speaking with his family? How did he acquire a substantial parcel of land? Why was he unmarried? Why leave Boston for Virginia? Why did his sisters, who supposedly resided in the Springfield area of Massachusetts, decide to bury him in a teeny tiny hockey town known as Windsor Locks without any relations? I have tried to the best of my ability to locate any further records, but have been unable to do so beyond what I have attached. The newspaper clippings concerning the Stevenson's regiment and subsequent owed wages are speculation. I am unsure whether or not this is the same individual, particularly since the owed wages article was dated November 1858, which would be 4 months after his death. It is likely that the individual posting was unaware that he was deceased. The heirs wanted ad would have been posted just 1 month after the wages ad. I am unclear why I cannot find an official death record, criminal record, land deed, marriage record, or any official indication placing him in either Virginia or the Boston area. I thus humbly enlist the sleuths of Reddit to please help me solve the mystery that has been nagging at my soul for the past 14 years. Who is James Mulvey? And what in the heaven's name did he do or not do? Was he an enigma in life as in death? Or am I just crazy? This post was uploaded onto the RBI sub by the user Vanguard Denk J9 on December 5th of 2020. This is the picture of James Mulvey's gravestone. The OP also included these links to articles from old newspapers that could shed some light onto who James Mulvey could have been. Heirs wanted. Whereas a man by the name of James Mulvey died in this place last summer, leaving 3 sisters, namely Catherine, Jane, and Mary, somewhere in the United States. But as he supposed at the time of his death, they lived in Springfield, Massachusetts. I have written there several times, but can hear nothing of them. They have probably moved west. Said James Mulvey was a native of Leitrim, Ireland, and has left a considerable property for the benefit of his sisters. Now, as administrator of said James Mulvey, I offer a reward of $20 for the first person who shall give me the address of all, or either of those 3 ladies, so that I can find them out. And another article. Notice to all, extra pay, bounty land, pension, and other claimants against government, whose claims have been rejected or suspended, or not yet applied, will do well to notify us, as such claims that have been abandoned by other agents have been successfully prosecuted by us. Children of deceased soldiers who were under 21 years old on the 3rd of March 1955 are entitled to land, as well as all who were in battle before that time. Address: Lloyd & Co. Claim Agents, Washington, D.C., 15th Street. The whereabouts of James Mulvey or heirs, Sergeant and Colonel Stevens, New York Volunteers, Mexican War, is wanted. There is an old belief that people who take their lives should be buried outside of the gates of the cemetery, or at least in an isolated part of it. It seems to me that the wisest would be to talk to the employees of the cemetery. Based on the archives, they will have the most complete information about who at least took care of this person's funeral, because he was buried with a good headstone. This way you can expand your search to his friend. You should also contact the New York State Military Museum and Veterans Research Center. They should have the largest amount of information about New York volunteers, date, and on the basis of their enrollment in the service. Just be sure to clarify when you ask questions that you're talking about James, who served in Group F, because in Group A, there was another native of Ireland, Sergeant Robert A. Mulvey, and there is some info about him there. These people may be related too, or their same last name may have puzzled people who were looking for James. As the article says, his sisters were already married and did not live with him. Most likely, James died on the trip, and not one of his sisters took care of his burial. Even if he had an excellent relationship with his sisters, in those days, communication was simply too difficult, and establishing the fact that they were living relatives would have taken too long. If you have time, try browsing the articles in the town's library. Maybe an obituary was issued for his death. This will help you know if James lived there or was passing through. I only suspect that he may have taken his life. All great information. Thank you. Unfortunately, it's no longer easy for me to visit the town or the library, as I no longer live anywhere in the area. I was hesitant to believe that he served, since it was not noted on his headstone. Thoughts? He definitely served there. I found him at a couple 1st Regiment rosters. He was Company F, Cavalry Sergeant. This may be coincidence, but this is highly improbable due to matching age, based on all the articles in which a relative either claimed him in the search, or someone looking for him or his relatives. So we have at least 2 independent searches for him. It is likely that he somehow died on the trip and was buried in this town. but nobody knew about it. If his death was sudden, and he was buried on the basis of documents available with him, then it's not surprising that this epitaph looks rather vague, and he was buried far away like a stranger. On the other hand, the tomb has an Anglican or Catholic cross, and a hymn, but this could be assumed based on the place of his birth. The OP would later provide us with this update. New York arrival, 1844. Sister Catherine's arrival, exact same arrival date, ship, origin, place of departure, and most importantly, family identification number. Based on her being 40, I imagine she was a widow or a spinster and thus remained unmarried. Another missing friends ad, September 1858. It states that he has left considerable money to his heirs. And the second James Mulvey, who died on September 1858, also born in Leitrim, albeit 15 years younger or so. Amazing coincidence. I researched the phrase "May God have mercy on their soul" and found this Wikipedia page that stated, "May God have mercy upon your soul," or "May God have mercy on your soul," is a phrase used within courts in various legal systems by judges pronouncing a sentence of death upon a person found guilty of a crime that carries a death sentence. I'm in no way saying that James Mulvey was a criminal, but I do think that this just adds more to the mystery of who he really was. Update, December 14th, 2020. The response I received after contacting the cemetery, in which I am notified that there is no additional information available beyond what his gravestone says. On the same day of this update, the OP made a separate post with a little bit more information. The majority of the feedback on my post advised me to contact the cemetery, which I did. I received my response this morning, and it solidified my worst fear. I cannot understand why there wouldn't be any information available, particularly concerning who erected the stone. I feel that I am out of place to look, and this mystery has done nothing but compound itself. Presently, I am fairly certain that he isn't actually buried in St. Mary's, due to embalming being relatively uncommon practice prior to the Civil War, so perhaps his body is elsewhere, and we will never know. I have attached photos of his isolated grave courtesy of the clerk who supplied them. At this juncture, I am left with more questions than answers. I have spent the past week scouring the internet for hours, and have procured nothing aside from the arrival of his sister Catherine, and their joint presence on the Chester ship. I am curious for theories regarding why there is no information available at the cemetery, as well as any speculative theories in general, since I feel a genuine resolution is impossible. Okay, this is a long shot, but interesting. I searched newspapers.com for James Mulvey in 1858, and found that in late June 1858, there was a James Mulvey arrested with 5 others on the charge of mutiny, which carried a death sentence back then. I have not been able to find much more about the mutiny other than those few sentences. The ship was based out of Boston, Massachusetts. It ended up sinking in 1861 off the coast of Australia. There are later articles out of New York in November of 1858, which ask for the family of James Mulvey to contact the government about his owed sailing wages. If your James Mulvey was a sailor who was put to death for mutiny, it might explain some of the different locations. If you would like me to share copies of some of the articles with you, just PM me. Oh wow, that's absolutely fascinating. The timeline of death also adds up. I will admit that I saw a lot of references to a James Mulvey in Australia, but ignored them due to the distance. I'm not sure if the government would still be willing to provide him with wages and land after he committed such a crime, but I don't know the legalities of the period. I am also not sure why it would be alleged that he died in Virginia. I'll definitely shoot you a message. Thank you so much. I tried looking for the mutiny articles. Not even the Wayback Machine had any archived. Fortunately, it looks like the OP was able to do some research on their own and discovered this. Update, December 15th, 2020. A helpful Redditor sent me these articles regarding a mutiny aboard a Boston-based ship. I am attempting to find records of a possible execution, since the individuals were arrested a month before James' death. The mutiny is almost certainly a different James Mulvey, due to the prisoners being released in September 1858, 2 months after our James' death. If he died in prison, I'm sure it would have been mentioned, and if not, there is no reason for his site of death to be listed as Virginia and not Baltimore, Maryland. Another Redditor would comment this. The biggest problem I ran into was the sheer number of people named James Mulvey. even multiple ones born in 1820. I could never hook up his sisters with any degree of certainty. In fact, I could never confirm any of the documents to definitively be about him with any degree of certainty. In professional genealogy, one is taught to locate multiple sources for the same information before claiming someone is a certain someone. I was not able to find any one source that I know was accurately the James Mulvey which we are looking for. This, as well as the second phrase on the stone, caused me to think that perhaps he had been dishonorable. Perhaps he was executed. I just don't know what to think. Sadly, it looks like the mystery of who James Mulvey was remains unsolved, and with his name being so common, coupled with the fact that record keeping was not as advanced back then, it looks like we may never know. It really makes me think about all of the stories the gravestones can tell from those who are no longer with us. That's all for this video. Leave a like if you made it this far, and as always, thanks for watching.